What if I told you there was a time when the Iraqi dinar wasn't just a struggling currency, but one of the most powerful notes in the Middle East? Back in the 1970s and early 1980s, during Saddam Hussein's rule, the Iraqi dinar carried weight, pride, and value that rivaled even the strongest regional currencies. Money bag in those days, one Iraqi dinar was worth more than $3. Oil was booming, Iraq was exporting millions of barrels daily, and the country was positioning itself as a major economic force in the Arab world. The dinar symbolized power, not just financial but political. It was printed on high-quality Swiss paper, backed by a robust oil economy, and used confidently across the region. But behind the strong numbers lay a fragile truth. Iraq's economy was deeply tied to oil revenue, and its leadership was walking on a political tightrope. The Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s started to drain national reserves, forcing Iraq to borrow billions. That's when the cracks began to show, the same cracks that would later bring the dinar to its knees. When the Gulf War erupted in 1990, Iraq's economic system was shattered almost overnight. The invasion of Kuwait triggered UN sanctions that isolated the country from global trade. Foreign assets were frozen, oil exports were banned, and the Central Bank of Iraq was cut off from international financial systems. With no access to the outside world, Iraq began printing its own currency, what many would later call Saddam dinars. Unlike the older Swiss-made notes, these were printed on cheap local paper, often with poor quality ink and no real backing. The result, hyperinflation. By the mid-1990s, the Iraqi dinar had lost nearly all of its value. People carried bundles of notes just to buy basic necessities. A loaf of bread could cost thousands of dinars. The currency that once represented national pride became a symbol of hardship. And yet, even during the darkest years, the dinar survived. That's important, because it set the stage for what came next. One of the most ambitious currency overhauls in modern history. Fast forward to 2003. The US-led invasion toppled Saddam's regime and dismantled the old Ba'athist government. But amid the chaos, one massive question emerged. What do we do with Iraq's currency? The old Saddam dinars were worthless outside Iraq. Inflation was still rampant. The solution came through an international effort between the Coalition Provisional Authority and the Central Bank of Iraq. Together, they launched a total currency replacement, a new Iraqi dinar, modern, secure, and designed to represent a reborn nation. Between October 2003 and January 2004, over 4 trillion old dinars were exchanged for the new currency. Planes loaded with freshly printed notes arrived from British printing facilities under heavy military escort. For months, citizens lined up across Iraq to swap their old money, often under curfews and power cuts, in what became one of the largest financial operations ever conducted in a war zone. This new dinar, sometimes called the New Iraqi Dinar, or IQD, was pegged to the US dollar. It stabilized inflation and brought Iraq's economy back into measurable balance. But rebuilding a nation's financial credibility is not something that happens overnight. The 2000s and early 2010s were years of rebuilding, slowly, cautiously, and sometimes painfully. Iraq restructured its banking system, re-established oil exports, and regained limited access to international markets. The Central Bank of Iraq took critical steps toward modernization, creating stronger monetary policies and digital frameworks to prevent counterfeiting and stabilize the currency. Oil revenue became the backbone of recovery, once again providing over 90% of Iraq's income. However, global oil price drops and political instability continued to limit the dinar's growth. Every step forward seemed to be met by another challenge: corruption, regional tensions, and economic mismanagement. Still, Iraq kept moving forward. Gradually, it built foreign reserves exceeding $100 billion, increased gold holdings, and expanded trade with neighbors like Iran, Turkey, and China. Investors began to take notice. The revaluation conversation, once just whispers in online forums, started gaining mainstream attention. Could Iraq's currency one day regain even a fraction of its former glory? Today, the Iraqi dinar stands at a crossroads, not collapsing, but not yet soaring either. The real story now lies in reform. Iraq's government and central bank are focused on modernizing financial systems, tightening anti-corruption measures, and introducing digital banking platforms that align with global standards. Recent moves, like the October 2024 oil revenue agreement with international banks, mark a clear shift toward independence and control. By processing oil payments domestically, Iraq is reducing reliance on foreign systems and strengthening its financial sovereignty. For dinar watchers, these are not small changes. Each reform adds a layer of credibility, stability, and potential value. While no one can predict an overnight revaluation, the trend is unmistakable. Iraq is rebuilding the same foundation that once made its currency strong, this time, not through power, but through policy. From Saddam to today, the Iraqi dinar has lived through wars, sanctions, collapse, and rebirth. Its story is one of survival, a currency that refused to die. And now, as Iraq steps into a new economic era, that story might finally be heading toward a long-awaited chapter, one of redemption and renewal.